Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 2, Episode 8, 9 Ways to Keep Your Prospects Warm Who Have Stalled Until Q1 Without Being a Pest. My name is Beck Holland. I'm the CEO of Being a Pest and Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you do me a favor, go ahead and download the deck on the side of this session so you can follow along at each step of the way. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. There are going to be 9 different ways that we're going to go over today, so let's jump in. Number 1 is sending over relevant content. So this is a very typical one that I see people do in the industry. I typically put a couple of different rules along with this one. Number 1, that it's third party. It might sound crazy, and I know that we spend a lot of time laboring on the content that we want to do in-house. But typically when a salesperson is sending me something, especially cold and I don't know them, the number 1 thing I'm thinking in my mind is that they're a salesperson and that they have an agenda. So that any content that you're sending over to them, they're on high alert that this might be something that's trying to prove a point that you're trying to make, get you to buy their product, or something that might be intermixing a little bit of false data to win you over as a client. So I typically try and pick something third party so that it doesn't prove like, oh, okay, we're awesome and we're the hero. It's just very, very true and agendaless of like, oh, here's a piece of content I thought you might like. And I usually, point number 2 on that, I include one point that stood out to me. So instead of just shipping over some piece of content that's maybe a 45-minute webinar, you want to say in minute 21 at second 32, the author covers X, Y, and Z, scaling teams effectively through sending over relevant content. One point that stood out to me was that it should always be third party. So you want to diagnose for the person that you're sending it to. Here's one little takeaway that you can take away so that whenever they see that takeaway, they're more interested in going into the content in general because they know that it's high value because of the point that you picked out. The third point on sending over relevant content, I would say you need to make sure that there's nothing in it for you. You need to make sure that at the onset of selling, to this person, again, the topic today is selling without the icks. You want to make sure that you avoid any kind of icky selling, any kind of agenda-driven selling. And so one of the main things that predicates giving someone the icks is that you have an agenda, that you're sleazy, that you're pushy, that you're not actually trying to help them. So you want to make sure that you avoid anything that has a point or anything that would really be a win for you if you want to not give them the icks and make them see you as someone who's different, who's an advocate, and who's in their corner, regardless of whether they buy your product or not. So nothing in it for you, and making sure that it doesn't have an agenda is the last point that I have on that. So number 1 is content. Number 2 is you want to send over an idea that makes things better on your prospect. So I would argue you should be selling like this no matter what. But whenever you get to know your prospects, especially if you've been selling into this person for a while, you get to know several of their different pain points, their world, etc. Someone's not just going to open up to you if you've done it correctly. Someone's not just going to open up to you about your product in specific and the things that deal with that product. They're going to open up to you about a litany of things, and you always want to welcome that information. The more information from my perspective, the better that you know about your prospect, and so within reason. But you want to, number 2, send over some kind of idea that makes things better for them. So the most effective person that I've seen do at any of this selling without the icks and adding value outside of the core product is Dan Smith. I want to give a shout out to him. He's the Chief Academy Officer over at Winning by Design. Super lethal. And at one point, Dan and I were working together, and I remember he was just constantly sending over different pieces of material, different things that really made my day better, and didn't necessarily have to do with him as a seller. So he did this very consistently of like, instead of just helping me solve problems within, the pre-existing team I had in terms of my training needs, he was constantly sending me over ideas of ways to make things better in my life in general, because he knew as a holistic person. So, if he made my world better, regardless of whether it had to do with his product, it bumps up the likelihood that they are going to actually buy your product. So a couple of different points on this, a faster, cleaner way to do something, some tips that go along with this, something that is low in time investment from them is free, and again, doesn't have anything to do with your product. So this is really the precipice of value for me. This is what it's predicated on, is this something, when someone's sending me over value, if I have to pay something for it, if I have to have a ton of time investment, if I have to really be deeply involved to get this thing, then typically I'm going to skip over it, especially if I am a decision maker and my one bottleneck is time. So you want to make sure that it's quick, easy, and breezy for your prospect, but it's also something that really makes their day better. Number 3, a good way to stay top of mind without coming off icky is to know what's going on in their world. This can come down to a bunch of different things, but company moves, headway, things that are happening with them, engaging with their content on LinkedIn. If they're making posts and they're being a part of webinars or writing articles, etc., you always want to be the person that's front and center and who is following them along and is their fan. So there's a number of people that I can think of when I talk about my content. I know the top 10 people that are constantly there engaging and liking things. So that would bump up, not necessarily the likelihood that I would buy from them, but it would certainly bump up the likelihood that I would engage with them, because that is really a capital. So if social media has taught us anything, or it's taught us 2 things. Number 1, people want to be famous. And number 2, that attention is a form of capital. So if someone who's liking and engaging with my posts, constantly, putting great comments, really thought-provoking comments, it's going to earn them, in my mind at least, some seat at the table, that I'm willing to engage with them because they have given me that follow, given me that attention, and given me that time. So you can do a bunch of, know what's going on in their world in a bunch of different ways. Here are just a few. News with their competitor, company moves, headway, etc. But you constantly want to make sure that, again, this is someone that you have already taken the time to sell into. Meaning you did the lead generation, you did the marketing, you got them to come inbound, maybe it was outbound, you send them over some content, you did discovery, you spent some time with them, trying to understand their needs on the front end. Maybe you even went as aggressive to talk to their team about deployment or go through security or talk about pricing, etc. And so this is someone that you've spent a instrumental time with so far. So you want to make sure that you really finish that back end of the race by just continuing to know what's going on with their company, so that if they ever do re-engage, if that budget does ever unfreeze, if they start to hire again, etc., that you know what's going on with their world, so they don't have to catch you up. So you don't seem disingenuous, like you were only getting to know them because of the ability to sell into them. And if not, you want to make sure that they think, no matter what, that you would have been there and that you were interested in their company, so that whenever budget does unfreeze, they're more willing to let you in the door. Number 4, you want to assist with a pain that they talked about in discovery. This is going to sound bizarre, but people have a lot of different pain points. A few of those have to do with your product, a few of those have to do with your space, and a large amount of them don't. So I can think of whenever I was running discovery on a lot of my prospects, they're going to, again, if you've built rapport and you've done it correctly, they're going to start to open up. They're going to talk about, maybe I have the pain point of I don't have great data, or I can't convert my website views into close one business, or I don't know what my closers are saying, or I don't know, how many meetings are being booked, or why those meetings are being booked, or I don't know how to clone my closers. So they're going to open up about a litany of problems. And if you, again, are doing your job, you should be listening. You should know all of those pain points. And so some of them you'll be able to solve with your product, but because of budget freezes, et cetera, that's off the table. So heaven forbid you assist with a different pain point. If there's a low-hanging fruit and it's free to you and it's free to them and it's low investment time for them, why wouldn't you help them with the pain point, even if it doesn't have to do with your product? So for point number 4, I would actually like to revert to my friend Dan and give an example of something that he did for a little bit of an example. So whenever I was a buyer of Dan's product, I actually, for a month, was hospitalized for a 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree burn from the waist down. So this is a pain that's completely even outside of the business realm. When I was in the hospital, Dan found out through a friend that I was in the hospital. I didn't even tell him directly. And all of a sudden, there were flowers at my hospital bed from him. So I really felt like, as a prospect and as a buyer, that Dan was there for me as a person, Dan was, someone who wanted to provide value, communicate to me that he cared about me, and really be there by my side, regardless of whether I bought his product or not. And so when it comes to the pains of your buyers, they're going to have a litany of pains. Some of them are going to be business, some of them aren't going to be business, but certainly within the business realm, there's going to be a multitude of problems that they're going to run into in their day. They'll be much more likely to buy your product if you help alleviate with one of those. So I listed a couple of points here of how to do it. I would find a free way to assist them, low involvement to them, doesn't always have to do with your product. If it is something to do with your product, I would make sure it's free. I wouldn't try to sell to them with a discount and guise it as a free giveaway. I would say, like, if you're going to make it product related, that it needs to be giving your product away for free. Not saying that you should give your product away for free, but as a buyer, if you're going to go this angle, then I would make sure that it's very, very low involvement and free to them, so that they feel like that it was genuine. But here's a couple of rules of how to do this. But I would listen to the pains that they had in the buying process and want to understand, like, is there any way that I could help them regardless of whether it has to do with my product or not? Number 5, pretty straightforward, send over a direct mail package. I put a couple of rules over here. I would always make sure that it's something that's personalized to them. It's something that you can relate back to the buyer persona, and maybe something they mentioned in a discovery call. And I'll give you an example. I've seen a lot of people who are using direct mail platforms to send their prospects cupcakes, or send their prospects, candy or chocolate, or, whatever, alcohol, etc. You always want to make sure that your prospect, number one, really finds value in what you're sending over. And number 2, that there was some kind of business reason. So I think we're past the days of the gift basket. We're past the days where the gift basket is going to win the sale. It's going to make someone feel appreciated, but you always want to be talking to someone about their pain point, talking to someone about their business, and making sure that every move you make had something to do with their core business. So I've gotten a lot of cupcakes in my time as a leader, in my tenure as a leader. You want to make sure that if you're going to send over cupcakes, that it has to do with something that they mentioned earlier in the sales cycle, and you can tie it back into, their relevant buyer persona. I'll give you an example. So I had a rep that was selling for me on a team that wanted to send a client a bottle of wine. So this client was a very, very high net worth client, may or may not rhyme with Schmoober, and is the VP of sales over at Schmoober. So at this point, the rep that I had on my team said, I want to send over a bottle of wine. And I said, well, what's the hook? And he said, well, there is no hook. I just think that she'll really like wine. I said, instead of sending her a bottle of wine, I think that will get her attention a little bit. But if you send her over a wine aerator and talk about how, great wine comes down to highlighting the best flavors and a little bit of balance, and how within your sales conversations, what if you could have balance in your sales conversations and highlight the best flavors of your sales conversations, so you could double down on the good and eliminate the bad practices and close more deals as a result. He says, okay, sounds like a good angle. Sends over the wine aerator. We got a meeting within 15 minutes. So if you're going to send over a direct mail package, I think that it's a very, very great way to pattern interrupt. It's very different. You're communicating to your buyer that you really, know them. But you want to really amplify that power by knowing something about them and then tying it to your business use case. So one more example, and then we'll move on. I had another teammate on a team that I was working with who basically said, I want to send over a package to this person, and I know that they were really into sports and weightlifting. So he sent over a note that said he had noticed that this person also had gotten injured. He sent over a knee brace and said, hi, let's call him Taylor. Hi, Taylor. Reason for my outreach is I noticed that you were a very intensive weightlifter and that you got hurt a couple of years ago, attached as a knee brace. When it comes to weightlifting, or it comes to great sports, it's all about your level of support. What if you can provide the same level of support that this knee brace provides to your knee, to your sales teams over at, let's say Drift, by highlighting for them the best parts of their sales conversations, what they need to eliminate to close the next deal so that they can drive more revenue as a result. Again, it was under 24 hours before we got a meeting with this person. So this can be a very powerful concept, but you want to, especially within the context of not having the icks, you want to send this over to someone, something maybe they mentioned earlier in the sales cycle. They like golf. They like wine, they like grilling, etc. And you always want to send that over in a very thoughtful manner and know what they care about, so that the gift means all the more. So number 6 is making them aware of a potential threat that they didn't know about. So there's a number of ways that you can sell in general, pain in the present that they knew about, pain in the future that they knew about that was coming, pain that they didn't know about in the present, pain in the future that they didn't know about. But this is a great way to really drive advocacy for your potential customer and your prospect and make them know that you are in their corner and you're identifying things, that they might trip into in the future. So I read a LinkedIn post the other day where someone was talking about how he had a pain point that he didn't know about until a week ago, that if someone would have reached out to him a year ago from a very, very high, vendor, well-known vendor, that he would have bought on the spot. So people love, especially leaders, to know the stuff that they don't know. So as a leader, it is all about solving for your blind spots. So myself included, I've been a leader in several different contexts, and the people who really built rapport with me were the people who told me things that I didn't know about my business, that I didn't know about my team, that were going to have a serious negative effect if I didn't solve for them in the present. So making your buyers, again, this is for someone that we're selling into, they've pulled because of COVID, making sure that if you run into something, whether that has to do with your product or not, that you think might be a potential threat to them and you have really good reason to think so, shooting them an email and saying hey, considering your stage of business, on average, I don't know if you know this, but on average, 40% of demo requests are being leaked out, through a poor inbound process. If you double check your data, I actually have a way to solve for this. If you're anywhere, I've seen companies anywhere from 15 to 18% of people who are requesting a demo actually make it into a demo. So if you give them a business point like that and say, I don't know if this is you, but if you wouldn't mind, if you double check that stat and see how many demo requests are actually making through, if it's anything under 50, give me a call and I have a solution for you. So again, it's all about staying top of mind and top of mind for the right reasons. Number 7, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Number 7 is network connections. Again, I have a multitude of people who have sold into me before who have introduced me to network connections that have made my day more valuable. Again, you always want to be thinking about, does this really add value to this person? And if so, I'm going to send them over an email. So sending them over network connections, people who have a common job to them, people who are focused on the same thing, maybe even someone that they potentially want to sell into, but they have a reason to meet in the present. And I'll give you an example. A lot of people these days are starting podcasts just so they can send over a message to people that they want to prospect into and get them on their podcasts. It helps build rapport. It helps really get to know someone in a no pressure situation. People like giving away their thoughts. People like, sharing their information with the world, myself included. And so this is becoming a very popular trend where people are saying hey, would you be on my podcast, as a strategic move to sell into them. In this case, again, you're already currently in cycle, but giving them some kind of network connection that they can find some value from, anyone who's passionate about a similar topic, basically anyone that you could see them finding value from within their current role. Number 8 is referrals. This is a great way to stay top of mind for someone. Send them business. So if you hear of someone who is in the market for a sales engagement platform or looking for a way to systematize their outreach and really book more meetings, then I would refer this business in. So I have revived several deals this way where I say hey, I'm not going to send them a checking in email. I'm going to send them an email where I'm basically giving them a potential customer. And so it makes them more likely to want to respond to that other request that I had because of how valuable I was in the process. And number 9 is going to be communities. So a lot of different communities popping up right now, especially within the SDR space and the rev sharing space, or the rev space. And so, maybe sending them over some kind of invite of hey, I've been checking out this community. They're really, really good. I really have been finding value from X, Y, and Z portion and thought you might want to be a part of it. Again, always be focused on, does this really add value to my prospect? Because if they join that community and it's not high value to them, you have essentially taken a step back, because now your prospect sees you as someone, best case scenario, who doesn't really know what they want, and worst case scenario as someone who made an intro to something just to make them feel really good so that they would close on the back end whenever it wasn't really valuable. So the people that I remember during the selling process are the people not only that send me these emails or network connections or referrals or communities or pieces of content, but the people who sent me the right ones that I really found value in. So you want to make sure you're always thinking that through. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session and want to hear more, then just go ahead and check out the other sessions that are like right next to it on the website. And if you really like this session, and I'm not being too much of a pest, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, tag us in your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. Either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day.